They didn't win the lottery. They didn't get famous. They didn't build an empire. And yet somehow they seem happier than almost anyone you know. The people who live the smallest lives, small towns, small circles, small routines, often report the highest levels of daily happiness in study after study. Meanwhile, the people chasing bigger, faster, more, the ones with the biggest houses, the widest networks, the most impressive achievements, often report something closer to constant, low-grade dissatisfaction. That should not make sense, but it does. And once you understand why, you may never look at ambition the same way again. Stay till the end, because this isn't a video telling you to give up on your dreams. It's a video explaining something psychology has known for decades, but almost nobody talks about clearly. Let's start with a concept that changes everything. It's called the hedonic treadmill. Here's how it works. Humans have a remarkable, almost frustrating ability to adapt to anything, good or bad. You get the promotion, the new house, the relationship you always wanted. For a while, you feel incredible. And then, without you noticing, your baseline resets. The thing that once felt like everything becomes simply normal. And you start looking for the next thing. This isn't a personal failure. It's built into the architecture of the human brain. We are wired for pursuit, not arrival. Which means the bigger your life gets, the more your brain quietly recalibrates what enough means. And enough keeps moving further away. Now here's where it gets interesting. People who live smaller lives often, without realizing it, step off this treadmill entirely. Not because they lack ambition, but because their daily existence is built around a fundamentally different psychological structure. One that research keeps showing produces more consistent happiness than constant expansion ever does. Let's talk about the first reason: choice overload. There's a well-known study in behavioral psychology where researchers set up a table with jam samples. One table offered 6 flavors. Another offered 24. You'd assume more options would mean more sales. The opposite happened. The table with fewer options sold significantly more jam. Why? Because more choices didn't create more satisfaction. They created more anxiety about making the wrong choice. This is called the paradox of choice, and it applies far beyond jam. It applies to careers, relationships, cities, daily decisions. A life with fewer, well-chosen options requires less mental energy spent second-guessing, comparing, and wondering what else is out there. And that saved mental energy doesn't disappear. It becomes available for something else, actually being present in the choice you already made. People living small lives often have fewer restaurants to choose from, fewer job options, fewer versions of what could have been. And counterintuitively, that constraint often produces more contentment, not less. Because contentment requires closing doors, and a bigger life keeps every door open indefinitely. Which sounds like freedom, but often functions as a quiet, permanent low hum of anxiety. Now let's talk about the second reason: social comparison. Human happiness has never been measured in absolute terms. It's almost entirely relative. Psychologists call this social comparison theory, and it explains something strange. A person earning what would be considered a modest income in a small town where most people earn similarly often reports more life satisfaction than someone earning significantly more in a city where everyone around them is earning even more than that. It's not about how much you have, it's about how you measure yourself against the people closest to you. And here's the part that stings a little. The bigger your world gets, the more people you're exposed to through travel, social media, ambitious circles, the more comparison points your brain automatically generates. You are no longer comparing yourself to your neighbor. You are comparing yourself to everyone, everywhere, all the time. People who live smaller lives are, often unintentionally, protected from this. Their comparison pool is narrower. And a narrower comparison pool means it's dramatically easier to feel like you're doing okay, because you probably are, relative to the people you actually see every day. Now let's talk about the third reason, and this one might be the most important: depth over breadth. Big lives tend to produce wide but shallow social networks. Hundreds of connections, dozens of acquaintances, a calendar full of surface-level interactions. Small lives tend to produce the opposite: fewer relationships, but relationships with extraordinary depth. The same neighbors for 20 years, the same small friend group since childhood, the same family gathering every single week without fail. And here's what decades of happiness research keeps confirming, most notably in the Harvard study of adult development, one of the longest-running studies on human well-being ever conducted. The single strongest predictor of long-term happiness isn't wealth, achievement, or fame. It's the quality and depth of close relationships. A big life often trades relationship depth for relationship quantity. A small life, by its very structure, tends to protect depth simply because there's nowhere else for that depth to go. You see the same people at the same grocery store, the same coffee shop, the same gathering, week after week, year after year. That repetition, which sounds boring on paper, is exactly the soil deep relationships grow in. Let's talk about the fourth reason: predictability and nervous system regulation. This one is more physiological than psychological, but it matters just as much. The human nervous system, at a biological level, associates predictability with safety. A life with a stable routine, familiar surroundings, and low daily uncertainty keeps the nervous system in a regulated state far more often than a life of constant novelty, travel, and high-stakes decision-making. Big, expansive lives are often exciting, but excitement and calm nervous system regulation are not the same thing. Excitement activates the same stress response systems as anxiety, which means a life full of constant new experiences, while thrilling, can also keep the body in a low-level activated state that rarely fully powers down. Small, repetitive lives, by contrast, allow the nervous system to spend more time in what's called a parasympathetic state: rest, digest, recover. And it turns out, a huge portion of what we experience as contentment isn't a thought. It's a physiological state. Calm bodies produce calm minds far more reliably than exciting lives do. Now, I want to pause here and address something important. This isn't an argument against ambition or travel or building something big. Plenty of people build expansive lives and are genuinely happy. This isn't about size being inherently good or bad. It's about understanding what size actually costs, psychologically, and making sure that cost is one you're choosing consciously, rather than one you've absorbed without realizing it because bigger was simply assumed to be better. Because here's the quiet lie so many people are living inside without knowing it. We've been taught that expansion equals success, and success equals happiness. But research keeps showing those three things are not actually the same equation. Expansion often creates more choices, more comparison, more instability, and more chasing. And all three of those things are proven, direct opponents of contentment. So what does this actually mean for you? It doesn't mean move to a small town, quit your job, and shrink your entire life tomorrow. It means becoming honest about which parts of your expansion are genuinely serving you, and which parts are running on autopilot simply because bigger felt like the obvious direction to keep moving. It means asking whether you have 30 shallow friendships or 5 deep ones, and which number actually predicts long-term well-being according to the research. It means noticing whether the constant novelty in your life is creating genuine joy, or simply keeping your nervous system in a state that never fully rests. It means recognizing that closing some doors on purpose, choosing fewer options, fewer cities, fewer versions of your life you're keeping simultaneously open, isn't settling. It's often the exact condition contentment requires in order to exist at all. The happiest people aren't small because they lacked the ability to go bigger. Many of them could have. Some of them did and came back. They're happy because they built a life with fewer comparison points, deeper relationships, more predictability, and fewer open doors quietly draining their attention in the background. Not smaller because less is inherently better. Smaller because it created room for something bigger. Cities, bigger achievements, and bigger networks often accidentally crowd out depth, presence, and the quiet, specific kind of peace that only comes from finally, fully arriving somewhere, instead of constantly, exhaustingly chasing the next place to be.